Turn the volume off.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, Michelle.
Jan, I can't see your head.
Good
Oh,
evening, Lottie. That's good.
Your hand just barely caught a little bit up here in the side. Oh, there you are. You're peeking around the corner.
It is warm.
I don't get in trouble that way.
Oh. I seem to get in trouble. It don't matter where I'm at. I'm good at that. Oh, Eric.
How's it going?
Oh, pretty good. I see our chair is checked in. I don't see Kevin Gobelman again. Oh, there he is. Yep, he's on. Bless you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
I think we're still missing Brenna.
Hey. Yeah, then don't touch them. If you were, I would just hope that you invite me, that's all.
Chair is 6 o'clock up. You're muted.
Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
We need to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Jackie, would you mind calling roll?
Mayor Holston. Counselor Whitney.
Here.
Brenna Chrisman.
Here.
Counselor Coker.
Here.
Priscilla Davidson.
Here.
Counselor Splitoff.
Here.
April Allen. Kevin Gobelman.
Here.
Jan Kristen.
Here.
Counselor Kenyon.
Here.
Counselor Bjornson. Jan Hooker.
Here.
Counselor Hollett.
Here.
That's all.
Okay, well, hopefully some of the others are going to be checking in. It looks like we definitely have a quorum though. So do we have any public here for public comment? Is Brian on tonight?
I'm here, Counselor.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. I just want to just check and see if you could add me as a host so I can see hands again.
Yep,
You have it
sure, I'll
covered.
do that. Yep.
Thank you. And so far, I don't see any hands. Do we have anyone at the WAC?
No, the WAC is not open. It's I'm at the City Hall, and there's
Oh, okay.
no one else here.
Oh, okay. So it looks like there's no public comment. Why don't we move into old business? Brian?
I don't have any responses yet to outstanding questions.
Dan Barclay had his hands up.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that. I'll move back and call on Dan Barclay.
Let's see. Okay, I got one. Sorry, I just got off the lawnmower, just made it in time. Just a quick question, and I haven't. Okay. That's a serious echo. Hang on.
Yeah,
How's it now?
better.
Okay. Anyhow, just a quick question. When the 2021 budget was passed, it was passed the month after, basically, I mean, the committee knew that there was a, I believe, $500,000 EMS shortfall. Passed the budget anyways. And we moved right along the next month. Council performed their duty and placed a doomed public safety levy on the ballot that failed miserably, and trying to raise $400,000. That was 6 months ago. 6 months later, now we're saying 608,000 when actually if it's 1,503 accounts as briefed by the city engineer for the project, that's 631,000. So we go from 500 down to 4, up to 608. You know, it's like a moving target unless we're going to have a dedicated fire chief and do it as a dedicated position, not a collateral duty. The numbers just keep shifting, and we're talking 6 months here. Anyhow, just curious what the real numbers are.
Thank you, Dan. Is that everything?
Yep, that'll do it.
Okay. While I have public comment open, is there anyone else who had their hand up? I didn't see any hands. Okay, hearing none. Eric, is there any chance you have any responses to old outstanding questions?
I don't remember if I had any outstanding questions to answer.
Okay.
I don't have any on my list.
All right. Well, then I think we should just move into the proposed changes to the briefed budgets. Is that you, Brian?
No, that would be any budget committee member that desires to make a recommendation to a line item that has already been briefed.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Oh, actually, before we do that, I need to ask, is there anyone here with a conflict of interest?
This is Counselor Whitney. I'm going to claim a potential conflict of interest. I recently spoke with my brother, Rick Zelstra, who said that he may be doing a contract with the city for a project, and he may or may not submit an invoice. So I don't know if he's going to be paid or not. So I'm just going to submit a potential.
Okay.
Just to cover my bases. And I just recently talked to him. I thought it was different before, but I'm like, yeah. Now I have
Okay.
new information. So
Thank you, Counselor Whitney.
thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Counselor Hollett, I have a potential conflict. I have a spouse that's employed under a collective bargaining unit, and I'm also a volunteer for the fire department.
Counselor Bjornson here. I have a potential conflict of interest because I'm on the volunteer roster for the fire department.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Priscilla Davidson, and I have a potential conflict. My husband works for Oakridge PD.
Brenna Chrisman, potential conflict. My husband works for the City of Oakridge Public Works Department.
So nobody can decide anything. I'm sorry, who is that speaking? Has April Allen not checked in yet? Okay, well, if she shows up, then I'll be sure to ask if she has a conflict. Does anyone have any proposed changes to the budget sections that we've already covered in previous meetings? Seeing none, I think we'll move into new business, the discussion of the budget, governmental funds, specifically the Emergency Services Fund. And that would go to Brian, I imagine.
Yes, let me stop this share and put the presentation up. Can everyone see the title page?
I can.
Okay. So as you mentioned, we'll be briefing the Emergency Services Fund tonight. Before we get started, I want to kind of give you particularly the new members an overview of the fire department and kind of their area responsibility and their duties and some of the manning issues. So they have two functions: fire protection and ambulance transport. If you look at the ambulance transport, their area of responsibility, or their ambulance service area, as it's termed, it's 2,200 square miles, basically from about the way station up to the pass and over to the county lines of Deschutes and Douglas. And that population of people that we cover there is approximately 4,700 folks. Obviously, the center of gravity in the population is here in Oakridge. The nearest hospital that they would have to transport to do a delivery would be 45 miles, and the nearest mutual aid for ambulance transport is 45 miles. If you look in contrast to fire protection, their requirement is 2.2 square miles for their primary duty, with a population of 3,205 in the census 2010 census. However, we do contract services to Hazeldale and to Westford, and together that population is 1,495. So the nearest mutual aid for fire protection is 25 miles away, just a little closer. Some information about the ambulance service area plan. It's the county is designated with developing the ambulance service areas, basically divvying up the county into areas that have the ability to respond quickly and do it efficiently. So they've done that, and they have a part of their ordinance includes the ambulance service area plan. But as part of that, they actually have a contractual agreement with some organization that supports each of those ambulance service areas. So for us, it's we have a contractual agreement between Lane County and the city of Oakridge. That contract, that plan specifies response times depending on how far a distance you're away, the level of care required. In our case, we have to provide an advanced life support 1, which is the kind of the most critical care. And it also defines the dimensions and the boundaries of the ASAs. I believe there's 8 within Lane County. It also promulgates the administration of the Lane County Ambulance Services. In other words, how does it work, and what body has control over it, and so on. So that's kind of how what the area of responsibility for Oakridge looks like. And if you look at this next slide, this is our ASA, a pictorial view of it. And if you look at it, the dark green is our most sort of demanding response time, which is less than 10 minutes, and pretty much, Oakridge Prime in the middle of Oakridge. And then as you go to the light green, it gets less than 20 minutes, and that kind of includes Hazeldale and Westford, and not the more remote areas of Lane County, which in the brown is 45 minutes or less. And then the red up in the way corners is up to 4.5 hours to respond. So I'll stop here and see if anybody has any questions so far on the ambulance service area and how that works.
I do have a question, Brian. On this map is, I can't see it very clearly, but maybe it's considered section 6. Is that just a pop out of the actual town, or is it?
The area 6, you mean, over here?
Yes.
That's a different, that's ambulance service area 6, which is Cottage Grove, which is supported by South Lane Fire.
Oh, okay. So we're in 7.
Yeah, we're in 7 over here. This is our area.
Okay, and then the pink and orange and green is only in that the square of 7 that's ours.
Right, right.
Okay.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So let's talk a little about OFD, the fire department staffing levels, and what drives why we're staffed the way we are. So the size of the staff, and the full-time staff, is driven by the ambulance transport requirements. So ALS and ALS 1 in particular transport requires in the ambulance, an EMT basic and an EMT paramedic. So you have to have 2 folks. And if it's an ALS call, the paramedic is the one on the patient and the EMT is probably driving the truck. So where it gets critical is this second call out capability. If you make that assumption that you want to have the ability to respond to a second call, either near simultaneously or simultaneously, it means that you need to strive to have a 4-person shift for manning. We don't always get it because some of our capabilities is volunteers, and volunteers are volunteers, and they don't always are unable to sign up for every single day. An example, right this minute, you have 2 folks headed in an ambulance to the hospital, and we had no volunteers sign up today, so there's actually nobody at the fire station. If we got a second call, it would either be a mutual support call where we would have to call Eugene Springfield to respond, or if we were on our way back, we would just continue on and respond to it. So right now, we don't have a second call out capability at this very minute because we didn't get the volunteers today. So if you think about that, you really, your manning costs are really kind of fixed. You don't want to be in the situation that we're in right this second and not have ability to call out, because we do frequently get probably 4 to 5 times a week, you'll get second call outs. And if that second call out's a critical call and someone's having a heart attack, that's not a good place to be. So given that, you really can't reduce the manning at the fire department and EMS department without incurring a real significant risk, which is why you don't see the staff ever recommending a reduction of personnel in the fire department. To talk a little bit about the collective bargaining agreement, our fire department is a union outfit. They fall under IAF 851, which is kind of the overarching union here. And IAF also covers Eugene, Springfield, and some other surrounding areas. So that collective bargaining agreement, as part of that, defines the work, the shifts. So in this case, our fire department, our full-time people operate off a 48 on, 96-hour shift, 96-hour off shift. And this shift model really does define the minimum staffing level. You can slice and dice it many different ways, and if you had a lot more people, you could do a lot more different type of shifts. But given the amount of people that we have, this really is the most efficient way to do it. Our collective bargaining agreement also prohibits standby duty. And I don't know if you recall, but some time ago, the fire department did use standby people. So you'd have a full-timer that did their duty, say 1 day or 2 days, and then rotated to standby, where they were on standby on their day and would have to respond if a call went down. That was written out of the contract some time ago, I think in the 2018 timeframe. But it does incur some risk as well, because at that point, when you're in that situation, typically you're going to have one full-time person all by himself in the fire department all night. And if he gets called, then he's waiting on the other guy to get out of bed and get to the ambulance and get there. So not an optimal manning situation. So again, to reiterate this, it's the ambulance service, not the fire protection, that determines what the manning at OFD is, which is why you've heard Eric say before, there are similar cities or cities of similar size to Oakridge that have near all volunteer or volunteer fire departments the way they operate, if they have the ability to pull enough volunteers in. Any question on staffing before we move?
It looks like Audie has a question. Go ahead, Councillor Sweda.
Yes, I wanted to know, is there a reason why we didn't have any standby people today, and how do we get those standby? Who asks for them?
So this particular slide was talking to an old contract in 2018 where our full-time people, you could put them on standby and then call them up, and if they were called up, they'd be paid the regular rate. And they actually officially had to be ready to go within a few minutes from their home. In a situation like today, since right now we cannot legally put a full-time person on standby, if they respond, it's really on their own accord. We can't tell them to respond. What we would normally do is if we would expect to volunteer if a volunteer was available and they all can hear the calls because they all have the devices to do it. The expectation is that they would respond to a call. But we don't have any paramedic volunteers. So if it was a call that required ALS, it wouldn't, you know, they could show up and kind of provide some support, but they could not do the transport because they're not a paramedic. So to answer your question, we have no full-time standby now. It's written out of the contract.
Okay, so we don't, what are we gonna do then? I
Right
mean,
now, if we had a second call,
yes,
we would call Eugene Springfield and tell them to come and respond via the mutual aid agreement.
so that's a minimum of 45 minutes?
Yes, sir, which is why I don't support completely getting rid of ambulance service. I think that's unacceptable.
Yes, that's if they're not on a call. It could be up to how long?
Well, Eugene Springfield, they have such a deep pool, they would respond immediately.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on staffing?
Was that everything, Counselor Sweetoff?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And I see Mayor Holston has her hand up. Go ahead, Mayor.
I just had a question about how the staffing works with, you know, our volunteers. And I think you kind of answered that for me. But so what you're saying, so if we use the example of right now, so right now we have volunteers would hear the call out and they could respond if they were available. But right now we don't have anybody who has chosen this shift as a stipend shift either. Is that correct?
Well, perhaps it'll help if I explain what a routine, a normal day would look like for staffing. You'd have one of our full-time city employees as one of the 4 that we're looking for. The second one right now, we're using the people ready part-time people. So they flow in and would be the second, you could call them full-time for that day, but they are part-time temp help. And then we also strive to get at least two volunteers every day to volunteer and serve and get their stipend. So we have a staffing of 4. Right now, we had no volunteers sign up for today. And unusual because of a vacation or a leave of absence, we actually have 2 of our full-time city paramedics serving. So they're both on the call. So we have 2 paramedics on this current call. And we didn't, because we have 2 full-timers working, we did not use a people ready to save money.
Thank you.
Any
Is
other
that
questions?
everything, Mayor? Counselor Hollett, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple things into addition to what Brian explained. If we had a second out call right now, the dispatch would actually pay to respond, and dependent upon that, if a handful of our volunteers were available, they would respond to the call, triage the call, and determine whether another ambulance was needed. If an ambulance was needed, then we would page out to Eugene Springfield. Or if in case, like what Brian said, if there's no volunteer that's able to respond, Eugene Springfield would also be called right away for that if there were no volunteers respond. So there are times when volunteers show up that are not on the stipend calendar that staff calls.
Thank you. Was that everything?
I actually had one more thing. I was hoping maybe Brian could talk about it a little bit, and if he's unable to, I can say some things, but I was hoping that it could be explained to Budget Committee the effect if we decrease the level of staffing for full-time, how that affects ISR to citizens, if Brian's able to talk about that.
Counselor, the connection went bad for me when you were talking. Can you repeat it one more time, please?
I'm sorry. I was hoping that you could explain to Budget Committee how 24-hour, the full-time staffing directly affects ISO ratings to property owners and their insurance policy, how if we were to decrease, that would be quite a huge raise in people's property insurance.
Yeah, you're more familiar with it than I, if you want to continue on.
Okay, if everyone can hear me, fire departments are based on an ISO rating. Right now, Oakridge has a really good ISO rating of 5, and I believe that's probably the best. That's the best we've had in my time here, and I've been here about 12, 13 years. A rating of 5 is kind of hard to attain, especially for an area like ours, and even Hazeldale, I believe, also gets that rating of 5. Typically, in a small area, if you are to eliminate full-time staffing, ISO comes in and does a rating on your area and determines what your response would be if there were a house fire. Now, I'm sure you can imagine if we have less people that are full-time staff covering a station, that's going to decrease efficiency and decrease response time to homeowners' houses to essentially save your house. So what in turn that does is if you have a decrease in your staffing, your ISO rating goes up. I would guess that ours would probably go up to an 8B. And then what that does to your insurance company is they change your rate for your homeowner's insurance. And everyone that has homeowner's insurance, I encourage you to call them and ask them about it. Ask them what your insurance would be if you were an 8B or a 10. It's usually not pretty good. Sometimes your insurance ratings can increase a little bit. Sometimes they can double. I've even heard of them tripling. It all depends upon who you're insured by and your property, and all those factors go into it. Some insurances may not even cover you. So I just wanted to bring that up, that when you decrease staffing level for fire suppression, there is an even more direct effect on a homeowner, and it would be very, very substantial.
Thank you, Councillor Hollett. Was that everything?
That's everything. Thank you.
Councillor Whitney, do you have a question?
Actually, I have a question and a comment. So I looked for did some research on the ISO rating, and what I learned is that it's a scale of 1 to 10. And the things that they look at is the quality of the local emergency communications, proximity to fire departments, availability of firefighters, distance to fire hydrants, and then community awareness and how well the community is organized, versed in areas of fire prevention. Those are the main things that I found that impact the ISO when I was looking online. And so I do have a question about the 48-96 hour shift and how that looks. It was really hard for me to visualize that and see what that means, as in, you know, the base regular pay and then how much overtime comes out of that. And if that builds in automatic overtime, whether EMTs are waiting for a call or not, or how that looks. So I'm really looking for more information on that, just to have an idea.
Right.
And then also I had a few other things that I had questions about. And I don't know if this is the time to bring them up, or just, I think I should just stay on point. So.
Yeah, if it doesn't have to do with this particular slide discussion, you want to hold it?
I'm just looking, because I'm also looking for the number of ambulance runs versus PD calls. And definitely looking at how that overtime works for our staff here. I think that's really, I don't know, I just have a big question about that. And how that impacts PERS, because I know the more money you make, the more PERS get paid. And if the base rate is a certain amount, and then we have a lot of built-in overtime that's automatic. How that looks, you know, and what that means for us, and really trying to kind of massage that information out, because I'm really more unclear in that area. And then at some point, I'd like to talk about the stipends and how that impacts our fire department and EM volunteers.
Brian, on the two topics that she just brought up, are you going to be covering those coming up?
No, so I'll if it's okay, I'll respond to that right now if you're ready.
Yeah,
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the first one about the 4896. So obviously that means you're working for 2 days straight. You know, they sleep in the firehouse if you're on duty, so they can respond immediately. And then it gives them 96 hours off. So that results in a 3-shift rotation. And we have 4 firefighters, so one of those shifts is doubled up, which saves us having to buy a people-ready person for that day. So what that means is that each firefighter, a full-time paramedic, will stand 10 shifts a month, which is 240 hours. And overtime kicks in per FLSA rules at 212. So yes, there's some built-in automatic overtime if they work a full month. As you know, if they take a vacation.
Can you say some of that again? I was trying to write it down and I didn't catch it all.
Okay. So if you're working a regular paramedic, if they work the 4896, you'll have a 3-shift rotation, which means each firefighter most months will work 10 shifts each month. That's a 24-hour day. So that's 240 hours or 10 days a month. That's 240 hours. FLSA overtime kicks in at 212. So everything beyond that is overtime, built-in overtime. And if they work a normal month, they'll get that overtime. They will also, if another firefighter paramedic takes a vacation and they have to fill in, or if another firefighter gets sick and they have to fill in, obviously that is also going to be a day of overtime to fill in for that person. So that's kind of the way the shift works. To answer your second question, and there'll be general numbers here, but they're relatively accurate. Ambulance, or how many calls. So approximately 880 calls a year. Of that, you're looking about 56% of those are transports. So we do get a number of calls to come just lift someone up off the floor, or they feel a pain of some sort and they don't get transported, or perhaps they're diabetic and they feel like they have low blood sugar and they need someone to take a look at it, or they just want to get their pulse taken. So we do a number of those kind of, I'd almost call them primary care type calls, where in a more urban environment, you probably would just go to the clinic and get it looked at. So that's kind of, and I'll get you more accurate numbers on the actual runs if you want that. And then your last question, remind me again what it was concerning.
I cannot remember.
Stipends.
Stipends.
Yes.
So the stipends were in place when I arrived here in 2019. And we have a 12-hour stipend and you get $50. And if you volunteer for 24 hours, you get a $100 stipend. Now, obviously the stipend is there to encourage volunteers to participate and help come man the fire station. So they are volunteers, and it is not a salaried position. So they're not a city employee. As long as we meet some regulations with regards to Department of Labor, we're okay, and we stay within those realms. But that's kind of how the stipend works. And they also get some points if they do certain activities like training or an ambulance run. They get additional points, which kind of result in a higher scale, I guess. But Councilor Hollick could probably be more accurate on that.
I don't know about extra points on other things. I'm not sure about that part. I do know about the stipend program, and that also covers things for reimbursement that volunteers pay out of pocket. For instance, for myself, when I pay a babysitter to cover me, the department does not pay for things like EMT courses that are a few $1,000s for the volunteer to take. There's 4 different levels of EMT. So if you wanted to become, or excuse me, there's 3 levels of EMT. So if you wanted to do all 3 of them, you're into it for several $1,000s. There's a lot of other type of courses that you could take and incur. I can also say that the department hasn't bought uniforms for the volunteers, boots, those kinds of things. So stipend money reimburses volunteers for that stuff as well. Also, we have a few volunteers that drive in from Eugene, so I would assume that it reimburses that expense for gas. That's all that I have.
Thank you. Counselor Whitney, did you have any more questions or follow up onto what you just learned?
Not right now. I just have to think about it a little bit. I might have some later.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Bjornson, I just saw your hand come up. Do you have a question?
No, sorry, that's fine.
Okay. Counselor Hollett, did you have another question? I see your hand is up.
Yeah, my question was for Brian, and I was curious if both fire and police have FLSA.
Michael, can you answer whether the police have FLSA? I believe so.
Can someone say what FSLA is?
Yeah, let me find the spelt out.
While you're looking at that, Brian, yes, police just started that this year, or this, current budget cycle.
Fair Labor Standards Act.
So my understanding is that all FLSA stuff is federally mandated, that police and fire be paid in such a way. It's something that the city has very little bargaining over, I guess is maybe a correct term. It's just a way that, because they don't work 40 hours a week like a typical job. They work all sorts of hours, so they have a different federally mandated pay schedule.
Is that something that the cities have an option to be FLSA, or it's mandated?
My understanding is
We have no option. It's a federally mandated program, and it's implemented by the Oregon Department of Labor. So it's
okay.
You don't have a choice.
Exactly.
I was just curious because Michael said that the police just started that, so I was wondering if that was something that they just decided to do.
It's probably because they changed their hours around.
Oh.
No, we learned that we weren't calculating. We were calculating the overage different, and then learned, I'm not sure where it came in or how maybe when Bill was here,
yeah,
he and chief and everybody, we figured out, where we were off on that. So the calculation on the time card just changed for us to use that.
Yeah, that's correct. I remember Bill diving into that, and that's when we started doing it the correct way.
That sounds right. It's all based around calculations of your hours worked.
Okay, thank you. And were you done, Counselor Hollett?
I am, thank you. I'll take my hand down.
Okay. Priscilla, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering about the transport, like with, we're concerned about the second ambulance going out. So would there be a way to merge with another ambulance like in Dexter or Lowell so we could have our ambulance back here sooner?
So unfortunately, Dexter and Lowell are not transport agencies. They have an EMT on staff, and the EMT can go there and triage a patient until the transport agency gets there. So there is a, and I'll get to this later, but and I'll probably hold it for then, but about meeting someone halfway and doing the transport. But the bottom line is if you do meet someone halfway and hand off a patient, you lose that revenue because whoever delivers the patient to the hospital gets the ambulance service revenue.
So it wouldn't be able to be split as, half Oakridge, half whoever delivers the patient?
You could do that, but I mean, you're decreasing your revenue in half and your expenses remain exactly the same. So I'm not sure it's going to be a winner.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Splitoff, go ahead. You're muted, Audie.
Would it benefit us to have a full-time fire chief down there and save overtime that way?
Your fire chief's not going to stand a duty, a shift. An exempt employee wouldn't do that. He would respond to calls, but he wouldn't be someone that's always hopping in an ambulance and driving and transporting somebody. At least it wouldn't be planned that way. Obviously, if it was an emergency, it was an emergency. But I don't think that you would find a fire chief that's going to sign up to be a shift employee.
Okay, that's what I'm wondering. Is if we did that, but we couldn't mandate him to be a shift employee as well because they're full-time staff.
Well, why not just hire another shift employee then? What's the difference?
Well, because you're paying him or her a salary for the month, and if we put a mandate for him to be there on the calls, he only still gets the pay, he doesn't get overtime.
It would be unique. I'm not sure that you're going to find a fire chief at that managerial level that's going to agree to do that.
Okay, that might be a place we can look to see that may be a cost savings in hand too. I'm not sure. We just have to put feelers out, I guess.
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. Given that idea, you could just do an internal promotion and take one of our senior men and make him the fire chief, and he becomes an exempt employee, and his pay gets cut by a third.
Yes, but he could still respond to all the calls because we're still paying him the salary of the month. And if he doesn't have to respond, he doesn't have to respond. But if he has to respond, he has to respond. Is that a choice or not?
Well, you still have other problems. If he goes on vacation for a week, then you're counting on him to be one of your people that fills in on a shift. What do you do? If if he, for whatever reason, he's out of town at dinner and he can't respond. I mean, to count on him as a shift employee, I think would not be a wise thing to do if you're also expecting him to be a full-time manager of the department. I'd sooner just hire another shift employee at a lower rate, have them come in at a new rate. And I think it'd even be cheaper than the exempt fire and chief.
So you don't think we need a fire chief down there right now, or?
I would hand off that job in a second. You don't have the money for it. You don't have the money. We're already $608,000 in the hole, and that would add another 140.
Is that everything, Counselor Splitoff?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Counselor Bjornson, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak real quickly about what Priscilla said. I was just going to say that in my time as an EMT at the fire department, the only time I've ever seen a call go down where we meet up with somebody else, it's usually to get a higher level medic for a more critical patient. And we almost never, can't even think of a time we've handed a patient off. Usually once they're your patient, unless you take them to Life Flight or something like that. But unless we pick up a paramedic from Lowell or Dexter, volunteer in that area or something. That's all I had.
Okay, thank you. See, I was just thinking that we could get more transports done, therefore we could make more money and we could have the ambulance back here faster. But I mean, since the second ambulance seems to be the concern. But okay, thank you.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Okay. Were you done, Counselor?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Brenda Crispin, go ahead.
I just had a couple questions. The one, Chrissy, about the, if we have to limit fire staff, that would impact housing insurance rates. But I was looking at Brian's slide, our fire is only a 2.2 radius. So I'm guessing that there's other agencies around that would pick up those calls. I don't know if that's correct.
I guess I don't completely understand. I guess what you meant is that part of the ISO rating looks at what your fire department manning is. And if your manning is suboptimal, then they increase that rating and your insurance rates go up.
Okay. Correct. Perfect. And then Chrissy touched on this training costs. I know there's training costs listed in the budget and there's 4. I mean, how many EMTs do you have now that are volunteering? 3?
I don't know off the top of my head.
No, there's more than that.
Yeah. I'm mixing up the people ready people and the volunteers. I have to get a number for you. I don't have it off.
I would say there's 6 or 7, maybe 8. But part of those are out of town.
And those are ones that are actively volunteering consistently?
Those are actively volunteering.
Okay. And then you talked about uniform costs and stuff. I know when I was a volunteer there, the fire department purchased pants and stuff. I don't know if that's obviously still going on. It's probably not. Yeah.
Nope.
And then we don't charge for any non-transports at all. You don't do any kind of billing for a lift assist or anything like that?
If the call goes and they administer some sort of medical care, and I say that it's a diabetic patient and they put an IV in them,
right?
We will bill. It's just not. It's not on the kind of the insurance schedules. Most insurance companies will not reimburse for a non-transport, so we'll bill the individual, hoping that they'll get some money out of that.
Okay, I'm just thinking of I've been on lift assists of larger people. If one of your paramedics throws their back out, that's going to be a big cost for a free service.
Right.
Okay. And then have you guys ever because I'm new to Oakridge, and privatizing the ambulance service?
We'll get into that a little bit later. I've got a slide on that.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, I wanted to quickly ask Brian to clarify something on what Brenna was just talking about with the training. Is the training line item in the budget for the paid staff, or is that for everyone?
It's primarily for the full-time staff, but we do most of our volunteer training in-house on drill nights. So we'll try to have a fire academy. We haven't had one. We need one. But that training number is primarily focused on your full-timers, but not to say that it has never been used on a volunteer to do some work.
Okay. I think the next person was Priscilla, unless there's someone else who hasn't asked any questions first, but I think right now it'll go back to you, Priscilla.
Sorry about that. I just didn't lower it.
Oh, okay. Counselor Bjornson, do you still have another question?
More of a statement. Brenna was cutting out a bit while she was speaking. I couldn't hear some of the stuff, but she mentioned something about uniforms. And when she was a volunteer, the purchases she was speaking of, I believe, if I remember correctly, were actually paid for by volunteer association funds.
Oh, not the city budget?
Correct. Yes.
And we don't have that volunteer association anymore, or do we?
It is. It's not been very active, unfortunately, in the last probably 2 years. It's a nonprofit organization, though, separate from the fire department itself.
Okay. Brenna, is that a new response to that?
No, sorry, I didn't take it down.
Okay. Counselor Hollett, do you have something new?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that too about the uniform thing that prior when Brenna, are you able to hear me?
You're cutting in and out right now. I can hear you.
I just wanted to tag on to what Melissa was saying, that prior when volunteers would receive uniforms, that was typically the volunteer association buying the uniforms, which that money is pretty much probably depleted, but the city hasn't done that for volunteers in a long time. And as far as training budget, there are, like Brian was saying, there are times that the volunteers use the training budget, but not for things that you have to go to the college for, like EMT classes. Just the basic EMT class alone is about $3,000. That's not something that the city's paid for a volunteer for, I don't even know how long, but those types of classes are expensive and they're in different levels and several $1,000s. And that's just the medical side. That's all I had.
Thank you. It looks like there's no more hands up. So Brian, do you want to go on forward?
Okay, let's get into the line items now. So this is the revenue side. There was a correction to we renegotiated, obviously we visit this annually. We renegotiated the Hazeldale IGA, just the amount typically is what we renegotiate. So that correct number is 63,330. We'll ask the budget committee to put in that block when we fill it in. And if you look down under service charge, that is your ambulance transport revenue. And that all, our billing agency is Systems Design West, which is up in Washington. And so our guys, they'll do a transport, they'll fill out the reports and electronically submit it to Systems Design. Systems Design's an expert at how to bill it and, the contact with the insurance companies. And then they do that and then send us the revenue. If you look at the GMET, so actually it's GMET, Ground Medical Emergency Transport. So that's the state's effort to, as you know, and I've mentioned it before, the typical reimbursement from an insurance company or Medicare, Medicaid does come in near meeting the actual cost of the transport. So the state recognizes this, particularly for rural communities, and they've got a program where they're trying to subsidize it. So you agree to join the program, and then you submit reimbursement, and based on the distance to the hospital, the type of call it was, and the rest, they put it all into the calculator, and they come up with a reimbursement. As you can see, last year was 20. We're still working with GMET to figure out what that's going to be with the state. So we'll update you that number as soon as Eric can get a hold of it. And the last number there is where we chose to reflect the should the committee and the council decide to implement the EMS fee, safety fee. Any questions on revenue?
I don't see any hands yet, so I'm gonna go ahead and ask something. Unless Chrissy, is that your old hand up or is that a new question?
Sorry.
In our last meeting, I believe that we agreed to move that imposed safety fee to the general fund. So will that just be coming off of this one for the proposed budget?
That'll be in the next block over when we readjust that for the budget committee block.
Oh, right.
This is and I haven't been diving back into these slides and updating them real time. But Eric is working that with his spreadsheet though.
Okay. And then on the GMET, is our current, I know that they pay in like May of every year, and I know our budget for our current year says 20,000, but aren't we expecting to receive more than that?
And that's why we're holding off, because if we do receive more, I want to have a most accurate figure for the next year if we're doing better with them. So we are hoping to get more. We just don't know yet.
Okay.
Because Eric bases these estimates on previous year
Actuals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll update that later. Well, actually, I was real curious as to why that's a 0 right now. It should have at least been what we budgeted last year, but I think we're going to be getting about twice that. So are you saying you want to hold off on putting anything in that line until we actually receive something later this month?
That was the intent, but obviously if it doesn't, we don't know something, when you guys get ready to hand over the budget, then we'll put in a best guess in your column. How's that?
Well, how does the committee feel? I actually think that we should put 40,000 on that line.
Well, that's my line though. That's the staff proposal.
Sorry, what was that?
That column is the staff proposal. You really control the next column over, which is the budget committee proposal.
Right. So, well, I guess I'll come back to that because I see some other hands are coming up now. Eric?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the GEMT. At the time I had done the budget, the first time, the one that Brian is working off of right here, we had received no GEMT money yet. And after this, then Scott told me that he's been talking to them and we are expecting to get about 40,000. That's why this is 0. But yes, then when I do the next revision on the budget, we can add funds in there.
Okay, I'd like to propose that we do. Was that everything you had, Kathy? Well, I think I'm going to wait until we finish up with these 2 other questions and then I'll make a motion. Kathy or Mayor Holston, go ahead.
So based on what Eric just said, we know that we are going to get the 40K. I think that's what you said, is that it would be 40K, and we know that. So obviously we'll fill that in and put that in ours. And then also I wondered, fire med, is that consistent? I mean, I see it has gone down. It went down drastically, well, half by half almost, and then it's coming back up again. And I'm wondering if the reason why we don't get as much from fire med is because our volunteer organization isn't as active as it was. Do those two go hand in hand?
No.
Okay. All right.
I will make one comment on that, Mayor. Because of that drop, and I think we can do better on fire med. So for a modest, a very small fee, we can have it marketed by our billing folks who actually have a great list of addresses of our current customers. And so they're going to send out a flyer once we get the final figures worked out for next year. And I think we're gonna have a much better response because it'll go to many more people and be a good advertisement.
Good, thank you.
Excellent. Were you done, Mayor Holston?
Yes.
Okay, I'll move on to Priscilla.
Yeah, I was wondering about the ground emergency medical transport. Approximately what percentage does the federal government pick up on each bill? And is there a limit to how many bills that they pay?
Are you, when you say federal government, I mean, GEMT is a state run thing?
Okay, so how much does the state pick up? I'm sorry, I thought it was federal.
It's based on a lot of different factors. So I guess I can't give you a great answer that I'm willing to put my life on here. So I'll try to get you one though.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Is the GEMT money just an amount that we get, or do they actually review every single bill and decide what they'll?
No, it's based on like, what is your number of calls? How far was it to the hospital? There's a bunch of different factors, but it's not call by call. It's just,
Okay.
it's just an overarching, here's your situation and here's how many calls you do. And here's probably what you need for a subsidy.
Okay. Does that help answer your question, Priscilla?
Yeah, I may come back to it with more. I'll wait. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Counselor Whitney.
I just want to clarify about the fire med discussion. So the way I heard it, it sounded to me like we would send out a fire med application in people's water bill. Is that what we're thinking? Or just sending them out as a blanket form to people? I mean,
The Systems Design West has a much better database than we do than just the water bills. They have people that have actually bought fire med before, and in addition to other people that have gone through their billing system from Oakridge. So they would send all that out in a separate mailing, which I think will get more attention and better response. So that's kind of the way ahead for this year.
oh, and do they cost money, or is that a service that's?
Systems Design, since it's our billing agency, does charge us for that, and they also offer this at a very minimal amount.
Oh, okay, okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Is that everything, Counselor?
Yeah.
Okay, Counselor Hallett, go ahead. If you're speaking, Counselor Hallett, I can't hear anything.
City administration used to send out the fire med renewal form in the. Can you hear me now?
You just came in. Has anyone else been able to hear her?
Okay.
No.
I just wanted to say the fire med renewal used to be quite a bit more because it was sent out in the city's water bill, but this last year it was done differently. Before it used to be sent out by city admin, and I'm not sure why it wasn't sent out this last year, but I really think that the reason that the number was so much significantly lower is because.
You just cut out again.
Or it goes out, I think we're going to have a better enrollment. I'll just leave.
Okay. I heard about half, I think, of what you said. But I think I get the picture. Is everyone else good? Counselor Whitney, did you have another question, or is your hand still up?
Oh, it's just an old hand, sorry.
Okay.
It's hard to remember to lower your hand every time.
Yeah, I wish it was just automatic.
I know.
I'm gonna interrupt because I can't find my hand.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just curious. Hazeldale and Westford, we have a contract with them for emergency services. Are they also going to be part of the emergency service fee? In addition to that contract?
I'd like to say yes, but I have no authority to administer that fee. They're outside the incorporated limits of Oakridge, which is why exactly it's a temporary fee that I intend to use in order to reconfigure the ambulance service area to where it's somewhat, almost, hopefully break even. I know it doesn't sound good to be subsidizing people outside Oakridge, but I have no other choice as a way to generate revenue to do this.
I have a silly question probably. Is Hazeldale High Prairie?
They're High Prairie and more. They're High Prairie, then there's some houses over on Leduc and up near TV Butte. So they're a whole surrounding area, Oakridge.
And Jan, just so you know, you can press Alt-Y on your computer to mute and unmute, or to raise your hand. And or if you go down to the bottom of your screen, there's a little thing called participants. And if you click on that, it brings up an option for you to raise or lower your hand. You can play around with that.
It just says invite.
Under the participants?
Yeah.
Jan, you have to click on the word participant, not on the little arrow.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to add into our proposed budget $40,000 for the GEMT.
I second that.
Was that you, Mayor Holston?
Yes.
Thank you. Do we have any further discussion on the GEMT topic? Okay, Jackie, can you call for a vote?
Counselor Hollett,
I'm sorry, it's cutting out for me. Can you repeat the motion?
The motion is to add $40,000 onto the line for GEMT for the proposed budget.
Aye.
Priscilla Davidson,
Aye.
Counselor Coker,
Aye.
Kevin Gobelman.
Aye.
Is April still not here? Counselor Bjornson,
Aye.
Jan Hooker,
Aye.
Brenna Chrisman,
Aye.
Counselor Spleedoff,
Aye.
Counselor Whitney,
Aye.
Mayor Holston,
Aye.
Jan Christensen,
Aye.
Jackie, if you're done, I don't think you called my name.
oh, Counselor Kenyon.
Aye.
You're right. That's who I was looking for. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, that sounds like a motion passes. Brian, do you want to go to your next page?
Yes, so now we're on personnel. So here, you've seen this throughout the whole staff. There's some increases in the benefits side. So in this case, increases in health, PERS, workman's comp was stable, and payroll taxes. What you do see here is an increase in overtime. And that's based on a usage. So Eric, correct me if I'm wrong. I think did you average the current or the actuals to get the this year's budgeted number?
Yeah, I took the actuals that we have this year, and then we have the budgeted increase for the pay, for the health insurance, PERS, workman's comp, payroll taxes. I worked on the actual expected increases based on those wages below, and the overtime is just extrapolating how much overtime was going to be used to this year.
Yeah. Okay. Other than that, if you go down, you can see the increases, incremental COLA increases and step increases, which if you're not familiar with, we have a pay table and you start at the left side. And if you have a good year with no negative evaluations, then you automatically, for the CBA, you automatically progress to the next step. So each of those folks, and this year is kind of unique. As you know, we renegotiated the collective bargaining agreement last season, and so we had to kind of re-record the table because we were operating off of a collective bargaining agreement, which was amended by a MOA. So it was a mess. So we've kind of reset it. So there you see the differences in the expected pay there. Other than that, VIBA's the same, and as is life insurance. Any questions here?
Counselor Bjornson, is that a new hand?
Yes. Let me get my thoughts together real quick. That overtime amount does that have anything to do with the overtime incurred when a crew went over to the Holiday Farm fire? And did we get any money from COVID relief to cover that? I'm not sure if that factors into any of these numbers. I'm just curious.
You mean the increase in overtime? No, if you look at the actual numbers to the far left columns, that number is pretty on. The estimate for the last year that we did was probably a bad estimate because our overtime, I think, is running kind of higher, much higher than that. So it will be by the end of the year anyway. So I don't think the Holiday Farm fire has driven the estimate that we used to do that. But to answer your question, yes, we did get a healthy reimbursement from the state and the feds for the Holiday Farm fire, the conflagration, as well as we did apply significant funds from the CARES Relief Act or CARES Relief Fund to firefighter overtime this year.
Was that everything, Counselor?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more hands up. So,
Hey,
I see
Dawn,
Dan.
I just need to interrupt for just a second. I need to step away for a few minutes because I have a child that just took a nosedive off a hoverboard. So
okay,
I gotta go deal with that and then I'll be back.
Okay. Jan Hooker, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to find out, I think I know the answer, but on the health insurance, do the all employees pay part, half, all, whatever of health insurance now?
They pay 7%.
Okay, one question, is that across the board as far as all departments?
Yes, every employee pays 7%.
Okay.
If they use city health insurance.
Okay, right. So is there anything that says we couldn't have them pay more, which would maybe cut our share down a little? Just question. Thank you.
Brian, is that something you can answer?
Yeah, the amount that the employee share is a number that can be negotiated with the collective bargaining agreement. It would require a modification to the collective bargaining agreement.
And how often do we adjust or renegotiate agreements? Because I think we just did one recently, didn't we?
We did all three. We have three unions, and we renegotiated them all last in April, May. And but not to say that you can't. You can always call the union back and go back into negotiation if you have a reason to. You can bring it back to the table. But the term of the agreement, if not modified, is 3 years.
Term 3 years. Okay.
So, excuse me, we could go back and do that, correct?
Yes, it would be, you'd want to remain consistent. So you would go back with all three unions and go back to the table. Obviously, it's a negotiation. So, you know, whether you come to an agreement or not, we don't know.
Right, and that's understandable. But with our position as far as financial, it might be an idea to do something like that. I hate to see people have to pay more, but you know, we're in a position that we're going to have to do something, and everybody, no matter who it is going to have to give up a little bit. Thank you.
Mayor Holston.
Thank you, Councilor Kenyon. So I have 2 questions. First, to follow on with what Jan said, and you know, I agree with what Jan says too. But Brian, when the city renegotiated with the 3 unions, I think I remember you saying in a council meeting when you reported back that we had gotten the contracts that you were very pleased with the negotiations and that the unions that you worked with were very generous and that you liked it. So I guess my question was the cost of insurance a topic of discussion, and has it gone up in the last 5 years, or has it been 7% always? And then my other question is for the volunteers. We've budgeted $11,000 less this year than we did last year. And is that because we are using less volunteers, or we are going to choose to use less volunteers? I'm not sure why that number is going down.
So to respond to your first question, you know, to different degrees, I was pleased with the union negotiation. We did not go into the cost share for health insurance or an employee cost share. We focused primarily on work schedules, cost of living increases, and those kind of things. So we didn't dive into that because it's a more difficult thing to barter. And to answer your second question, I believe, I can't be for certain, but I believe it's because since it's based on previous actual numbers, our volunteerism, I don't think is as high as it has been in the past. It's gone down a little bit. So I'll ask Eric to back me up on that. Is that the way you see it, Eric?
Yeah, these numbers, the volunteer numbers, just based off of what's happening this year. It is lower than expected.
Mayor Holston, is that a new hand? Councillor Holick, go ahead.
I have a couple things. One of them was Melissa was asking about that overtime, if part of it was contributed to the Holiday Farm fire. And I guess Brian cut out a little, so I couldn't hear what his answer was.
Right. My thought was no, because basically Eric is actually doing actuals from the previous years. And if you look at the actuals from the 2 years and to the far left, the overtime looks to be pretty accurate. I don't know why the forecast number that Bill Jones programmed in here with my approval is so far low, but I think that's just an oddball number, 67,500. So I believe 91 is a good number.
Okay. I lost my train of thought on my second question, so I guess you'll just have to come back to me. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I know what it was. It was volunteer. I was gonna tag on to what Eric said, and I would agree that volunteer is definitely down. We just don't have the staffing that we did 4 years ago. It's getting better, but it's not where it was before.
Right. Was that everything then?
Yes.
Okay, Counselor Splitoff?
Yes, in the previous line over there, volunteers are 73,300. Was that contributed because we have people out on the fire? That we had more volunteer people here, or what?
Hey, Audie, that column that has the 73,300, that's a budget number. That's not based off of actual data.
Okay, thank you.
That's what we have currently budgeted for this year that we're in right now. And I wanted to ask a question about something. I see in the budget, it says we have a captain and 3 lieutenants, but I thought we had 2 captains and 2 lieutenants.
Yes, I recently promoted Captain Hollett, so that is not a correct line item, but it is what it is.
Okay, can that adjustment be made?
To rename it?
Yeah,
Can you
next
do that,
time
Eric?
Yeah, I can make the employee classification correct. Yeah.
Thank you. And then I had a question too, but I just forgot it. Is there anyone else who has a question? Okay, we'll move on then, Brian.
Okay, this is going to be a real eye chart here, so put your glasses on. So this is materials and services for the Emergency Services Fund. If you look, seasonal workers, so that includes our people-ready part-time folks, 4 to 5 of them that are either, most of them are EMTs, firefighters, and they come from people-ready. And since it's a temp agency, they're not classified as full-time employees. And in other words, we don't pay benefits on them. So that number is a kind of a total number because we're not responsible for that. But it is high. It's 197,000. As I told you, they fill in as that second body on a shift primarily, with the exception of 1 shift since we have 4 firefighters. So they do an excellent job for us, and I like the idea that they're not coming with the benefits and the loaded salary. Other than that, everything we tried to scrimp and save as much as you could and cut where we could, but there is a correction. We're going to reduce the building grounds maintenance to 5,900 and save a little money there. but everything else is just kind of a cost of living inflation increase across the board, no significant. Dispatch is always a kind of an unknown. We don't have the contract with the dispatch, Lane County Dispatch yet. So there's a kind of a worst case number in there. I would expect something from them in the next 3 weeks, though actually last year, I think they didn't send me anything till July. So that's kind of a conservative number. As you notice in administrative overhead in the past, because of the transfers we were doing, it would be a matter of charging administrative overhead, then handing it right back to them because we were transferring them so much money to balance. So this year is not the case with the ambulance, assuming there would be an ambulance fee. And so there's an administrative overhead charge in there for the fire department. Any questions on materials and services?
Well, I have a question. Well, I should check for everyone else first. Is there any questions from anyone on this section? Counselor Slidoff?
Yeah, what do you mean by administrative overhead?
As we explained early on as we started the budget cycle here, administrative overhead is the cost it takes to the admin department to support the fire department. So each department receives a fee for that, depending on how much work is done to support them. So that would be money to pay Eric to do the payroll. That would be money for me to do interactions with Lane Dispatch to broker their contract, things like that the admin department does in support of the fire department.
Okay, so that would be outside of your CA duties?
No, it is my CA duties. It's the admin part of the job, and we charge every department that same kind of fee.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Coker?
Brian, I have a question. Where does fire med fall into this?
Fire med revenue?
Yes.
It's on the, Eric, is that on the general fund or is that in the fire department?
Give me 1 second to look.
Okay.
It's in the fire department. We covered it in.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, 20K right there.
Yep.
I miss it?
Yeah, we talked about it a few minutes back.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on M&S?
Yeah, Brian, can you explain how that transfer that we make every year from the general fund to the emergency services fund is tax revenue that we're required to transfer?
I don't understand your question. It's just a transfer from the general fund to the emergency services fund so they can do their mission. It's not classified as tax funds or franchise fees or anything else. It's just revenue from the general fund that they receive that goes to the fire department so they can continue their mission without breaking their budget.
Right, but do you understand that the state of Oregon, says that we have to support fire departments with our tax revenues?
And if we're transferring funds to the fire department, I would say we are.
Definitely are.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions, M&S?
I have a question back on the page where the personnel is. And I'm curious where the FLSA is listed.
Overtime.
Yep.
It is in the overtime budget.
So that
Yeah, FLSA is overtime.
I know, but I just wanted to make sure that the FLSA is reflected in there.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
Counselor Sweetout?
Yes, I wanted to know, is there a mandate of how much of our tax dollars goes to the EMS?
Actually, EMS is designed to be somewhat cost neutral. If you talk about fire, there's no specific percentage. It's just you're required to, if you want to get shared revenue, you're required to provide that service to your citizens.
So there's no amount of dollars for the fire service that we can pay our taxes out of that goes directly to the fire.
Not to my knowledge. Eric, do you have a different answer?
That's what we decide as a budget committee.
That's correct. Whatever the budget committee decides to send money towards is the allocation.
Exactly.
And how do we know how much is there to allocate?
Sorry, what did you say, Audie?
How do we know how much is there to allocate?
If you look at the general fund revenue, that'll show you all the revenue that comes into the city.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on M&S? All right, capital outlay, not much to say here. We're looking at the radio pager lease. Other than that, you've got an unappropriated ending fund balance, and there's your bottom line.
Can I say one thing about the property tax revenue?
Of course, go ahead.
I just would like everyone to keep in mind that Oakridge gets about gets about $1.1 million in property tax revenue. And the ESF fund is getting transfers of between $500,000 and $600,000.
And in total, the ESF, the fire department and EMS cost $1.2 million a year to operate, and the police department $1.1 million to operate. And you contrast that with the $1.1 million in tax revenue.
So I think it's not a stretch to say that every department is getting a fair share of property tax revenue.
Yeah, including all the other funds in the general fund, like library, parks, the muni court, the WAC, those are all dipping into that 1.1 million.
You're absolutely right.
Plus all the other revenues that come into the general fund.
Correct.
I can't raise my hand, but I have a couple questions when it's my turn.
Go ahead, Chrissy.
I wanted to say that I think what Jan brought up about health insurance, I'm kind of wondering if Brian knows if 7% is a common for cities like us, or if it's less or more, and if it's more, if we can, as a budget committee, recommend directing Brian to go that direction, maybe increasing that across the board.
I have limited experience with, the other, talking to other managers about what their share is. I have seen some that don't make them pay a share, and I have seen others that go further to the right. I wouldn't say there's a norm anywhere. I think we're right about kind of where, if there is, we're probably there, because I've talked to more that have, that are at 7%.
Okay, so that's a normal number. It's not necessarily low or high.
Right.
Okay. And then my next question was actually what we were just talking about. So the fire department takes about, how much did you say out of the property taxes?
I don't know what percentage of property tax. I know that there's
not percentage, the dollar amount. You said 500 and something.
Well, that's not totally property tax money. See, all of the tax revenue money from all the different taxes and all the different revenues go into the general fund. There's a huge pot of money, and then it's sent to all the other funds. So the property tax revenue portion in that giant bucket of money is 1.1 million. And the total transferred to ESF is between 500,000 and 600,000.
Okay.
And property tax revenue is the largest single chunk of revenue that comes into the city by a long shot.
Right.
The next, just so you know, sorry, I won't go too far into this hole. The next largest dollar amount that comes from a single source is from franchise fees, and that's roughly 200,000. And then there's just a bunch of smaller dollar amounts that come in from all different sources.
If I remember right, when we started this, the section that covered the general fund, I don't remember going over the revenues. Was that part skipped?
No, it was in the, if you remember, we did started with the expenditures and we finished with the revenues.
Oh, we did.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would also like to just give out one other number that the cost, because people were talking about the healthcare costs, the health insurance cost to the city so far this year is at 340,000. Just to give you guys a point of reference.
That's for all employees.
Yeah, from July 1st, 2020 until the end of last month.
Okay.
Any other questions on capital outlay? Okay. So that's the fire department. So here's kind of the closing couple slides. So options to meet the shortfall. And this is to meet the shortfall. So as I said, lay on a 3-year EMS fee. And if that maybe 2 years, we could sort of roll the dice. And that allows for me to commission a redistricting feasibility study, which I have my doubts that there's just not enough tax revenue in Westford and Hazeldale to operate a fire department, including if you add on to Oakridge's. So while I think you could look at it, I don't know that it's going to prove out. However, I believe that, and if it does prove out, to stand it up is going to take some political will and the ability to convince people to join this district, including the residents of Hazeldale and the residents of Westford, instead of contracting out their fire services. More likely, I think, is to go back to the county and the commissioners, and we have the ability to do this within the structure of the ASA plan, and that's ask for a reconfiguration of Lane County. Because the real weakness here is, as you saw, we had 4,700 people in the ASA, and the size of it and the distance to the hospital. We aren't doing enough transports to even come close to having the ambulance revenue meet our cost of doing those transports. We would almost have to double the number of transports we're doing to break even. So I think something has to happen to make the ASA closer to break even, because and I'll get to this in the next slide, but that's kind of where I'll leave it. But other options are reduction to reduce expenditures. All these expenditure reductions, they're going to put a significant increase in risk increase in public safety. We're already kind of, on the edge, and to do any further with the fire or the police or the EMS to me, is going to put our citizens at a greater risk. So we're not recommended by the staff. However, Eric has done the math, and if you went down one police officer, you'd save $91K a year. 2 police officers, $205K a year. So fire department modifications. So I looked at a couple options. One is a commercial provider. So I reached out to the kind of the lone commercial provider in the area, or he reached out to me actually, and asked him what could he do. So he came back with a quote. I wanted him to give me two. One was to take over the entire operation. What would it look like? And the second one was, what would a hybrid version where he does a portion of the work and we do a portion of the work and we work out what the revenue is. So he looked at it and he came back with only one option, and that is a hybrid option. And he said, I can do the first call out capability with paramedics and an EMT. He says, I'll take all the ambulance service revenue to do that. And you're responsible for the second call out. And the way that results in the $56,000 savings that you see displayed here is I wouldn't have to hire paramedics, because that second call out would be a basic life support call out. In other words, I would only need an EMT, basic, and an EMT to do that basic life support transport. However, we were talking about handoffs. To do that effectively, to do it legally, if we had an advanced life support person, we would have to hand that person off to the commercial provider somewhere in between the hospital and here, and hand them off, and then he would take them the rest of the way to the hospital. So that's kind of why you only see a 56K savings, because our overhead doesn't change dramatically, other than being able to hire a slightly less expensive employee. So that's what you save. The second opportunity is to go back to the table with the union and modify the operational concept. In other words, modify the shifts. Put that guy on standby by himself in the fire department all night with a second guy on, put one full timer in the fire department by himself all night and the other one on standby at his house, and mandate that all firefighters live in Oakridge. So we operated that way, I understand, before I got here, maybe 2 years before I got here. And it was not a popular option, because it staying in that firehouse by yourself, manning up the thing by yourself and getting the thing underway is not an easy task. So those are the kind of the two things that I see you could possibly do to the fire department to save, not meet the shortfall, just chip away at it. So any questions on those thoughts?
Councillor Bjornson?
Yeah, back to what you first said about the redistricting. You mentioned that you don't think Hazeldale and Westford has the tax revenue to support that. Is that in addition to what Oakridge's tax revenue would be contributing to a redistricting or a special district, or what? What would come from the citizens of Oakridge city limits?
So as you know, we're limited on how much we can actually levy against our citizens by Measure 5 and 50. So right now, Oakridge taxes at a rate $7.21 per $1,000 assessed value. So that leaves $2 and change that we can levy, which is exactly what we asked for when we put that levy on the ballot. It will result in about $500,000 worth of revenue. The citizens in Hazeldale currently provide about, I think it's 180,000 in their current configuration to operate and pay for our contract fee. And Westford, unfortunately, they're like at $9 and some change for their tax rate. So they have very little headroom left to put a levy on them for a fire district. So that's my point, is that if you cobble all that together, I think you're going to end up with less money than you do now.
So the current taxes that are paid into the city of Oakridge that currently go to help support the fire department would stay with the city of Oakridge, and the citizens would have to pay more?
I don't know the in particulars about it, but it would probably be, they would probably take away, they do the formula and figure out there shouldn't be an increase in taxes, but maybe there would have to be in order to support the district. So That's why you need the study to see if it's feasible. But as it stands right now, just anecdotally, I don't see it being particularly convincing the citizens of Westford or Hazeldale to come in when they're currently getting fire protection for less than $100,000 a year.
Was that everything, Counselor Bjornson?
Yeah, for now.
Mayor Holston, go ahead.
So I had a question about that. Well, a couple questions, but I think one of them just got answered. But about the ASA reconfiguration with Lane County, if we were able to ask them to do a reconfiguration and reduce our where we respond to, and reduce that to just our Hazeldale, Westford, Oakridge kind of limits. I guess what I'm really asking is, if we reduce it, do we really reduce that much of the calls that we get outside of it? Or are we asking them to release us from having to have any ambulance service at all?
Now, the latter we can do anytime. We can give them 60 days notice and say, we're not going to be the ambulance service provider for this area. I don't want to do that. When you think reconfiguration, though, you're thinking geographical reconfiguration. My idea is a little different, where you work with them to develop some sort of a relationship, maybe with Eugene, Springfield, and the county, where we roll our people into a larger labor pool and make this a satellite firehouse for a joint organization.
Okay. And is that something that we would have to do? Would that be part of the feasibility study as far as the redistricting, or that would be something separate from redistricting?
It would be a separate effort. So what has to happen is we call for a review of the ASAs from to the board of the subcommittee, and we'll talk it over with them, and then come up with some proposals, and eventually the commissioners would have to hear it and make some sort of a decision on whether to move forward with any of the options that we provide them. The reconfiguration would primarily just look at, are there ways we can partner with surrounding communities, adjacent communities, to find a more efficient way to operate. And you might be able to, if you include maybe making it also an EMS district, you might be able to twist some arms in Hazeldale and Westford to join in.
I think that, sorry.
Is the county aware of our struggles with trying to do this right now? Have we had any input from them at all?
I've had a conversation with Commissioner Buck about it about 3 weeks ago.
And then one last question. To modify the operational concept and save, that's a savings of 105,000? Is that what I'm seeing?
That's the best case.
The best case scenario.
Best case. It probably less because of overtime and vacations and sick leave.
And that is a concept and a setup that we have tried in some ways before, and is really hard on all of our folks.
It is,
if I remember correctly.
It wasn't popular.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Brian. I'm done, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hollett, go ahead.
I think the latter thing that Brian said with, I think we really need to sit at the table with Hazeldale and Westford. And this is not only an Oakridge problem, this is an entire area thing. And we're not the only area to ever come into this. There are a lot of areas. Tualatin Valley is what it is today because of all the rural areas coming into these exact types of situation. And then they formed mergers and so on. And that's why they are the district they are today. And I think sitting down with all those heads at the table and really figuring out something we can do together is really the end goal. When I look at these other two, actually, when I look at the police option, I don't see that our community can sacrifice 2 police officers. And when I look at the other 2 cost savings for the fire department, that's really a drop in the bucket, considering you completely lose all control once you give it up to a private, and it ends up actually costing more to the citizen in the long run too. The other thing I wanted to mention is throughout this talk, I don't remember if we've ever talked about pay freezes across the board as well. So Jan mentioned the health insurance cost, but pay freeze is also something I think that we should at least consider. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Hollett. I would agree with that, with the pay freezes. And I have a question for Brian. I'm not sure how to word it, but first I'll make a statement. With the transfer from the general fund into the emergency services fund and adding the GEMT revenue that wasn't listed in the proposed budget to begin with, this fund actually balances. So I have a concern that when you were stating earlier that our ambulance needs to make double in order to support itself, I don't understand that, because this fund actually balances. So can you explain that?
Well, it balances if you give it $608,000 of EMS revenue.
No, with the 500 and whatever the number was, 568 that I had suggested that we transfer and we agreed to of tax revenue, and removing the emergency fee from this fund and adding the GEMT, it actually balances without a fee at all in this fund.
And what was your question?
I heard you state it tonight, and I've heard you state it multiple times in other meetings, that the ambulance actually needs to double its current revenue in order to support itself. And that statement is not true.
You misunderstood me, Counselor. They need to double the number of transports they do.
We need to double the amount. For what reason? To bring in more money than we already do?
To bring the revenue from the ambulance transport fees to equal what it costs to transport people to the hospital. If you take into account the lack of the collections and the people that aren't insured and that's what I'm saying. To bring the revenue somewhat near what it costs us to move people to the hospital, you need to do twice as many transports. And that's just anecdotal that Bill Jones figured out. But
okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mayor Holston? Is that a new hand?
Sorry, I couldn't get unmuted here. No, that's a new hand. So, you know, I think we're kind of all on the same page. At least I agree that I don't want to reduce our police officers, and I definitely don't want to put any more strain on our fire and ambulance services than we already are by modifying the concept, and $56K for a commercial provider, regardless of what that number is. A commercial provider, you know, it would be the last option that we should even sort of think about, based on my experience with that, as well as what I've heard from other folks. And so it sounds like, more and more makes sense to do this, ESF safety fee, whatever you want to call it, wherever we put it. Because the bottom line is, and I have to say, I have to really say thank you to Eric and Brian, compared to other times when we've looked at budgets. This really is a matter of opening up the cupboard and saying, okay, this is what we have and this is what we don't have. And it's up for us to decide how we're going to apportion, what pieces of bread we have left, and then figure out how to acquire more. And so I have to say thank you for having a nice, clear picture. I know it's confusing for me. It's confusing for a lot of us as we talk about. That's why we have such good questions. But I don't see any other way around this than to do that. I just don't. I'm concerned that our community will look at this and say it's a failure of our governance, or a failure of the council, or a failure of the budget committee, that we can't find a different way to do this. When in fact, this really isn't a failure. This is a recognition of what we have and what we don't have. And it's sad that we don't have more, but we just don't have the money. And so I really, I appreciate, Chrissy, what you had to say, and what everyone has said tonight, about where do we get the money and how can we reduce. I do think it's important to look at freezing wages, and I do think it's important also to look at asking our employees to pay more of their benefits. And while we don't know the end result of that, although whether our unions will go along with that, I believe they would, faced with some of the alternatives. So actually, I just really want to thank everybody for their good questions too, and Chair also. This sucks actually, but there it is. All right, guys, thanks.
Counselor Hallett, go ahead.
I don't have another question.
Okay, Eric, you're next.
I just wanted to kind of touch on what Kathy just said about if the citizens think the budget committee is not doing their job or whatever. I don't really agree with that. And every year previous to this one, there has been cash reserves that are available for the city to take to make up the giant shortfall. This year is the first year there is no cash reserves to make up the shortfall. So that's why we're in this situation. I just wanted to remind everyone that there used to be cash to take from, and it's all gone. So that's why it's so bad right now.
Right. Was that everything, Eric?
Yes.
Thank you. Jan Hooker, you're next.
Yeah, I don't know whether I can really ask this or not, but I'm sure somebody will let me know if I can't. I would like to know if, since we talk, every one of us have talked to different people in the community, we get their opinions of everything. And, the biggest issue that I have heard from many people, if there was another way to bill separately for this fee on its own statement or its own bill, I think you'd have luck passing it. The problem is when it's added to the water bill. If it's its own special thing, I think you would probably have it. Just a suggestion.
Thank you, Jan. I have Bobby or Counselor Whitney next. Counselor Whitney, are
Oh,
you?
sorry, I forgot to unmute. There's a statement that I'd like to make that has to do with a $35 fee and people that are very low income. And I really struggle with a way of making it very politically correct, because I don't know that there's a way to do that. But I do believe for those people that are low enough income that qualify for SNAP benefits, that $35 fee is something that could come into play with those SNAP benefits, and that can actually increase those benefits to help ease the burden of that $35 fee. So there are other little things out there that can help people in our community as we look at possibly passing a fee. So I think it's important to remember that as well. And I can double check with someone in one of my coworkers in one of their units to make sure I'm accurate, but I'm pretty sure that people that are low enough income to qualify for those benefits could see an increase once we implement a fee, if we do that. So just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. Counselor Speedoff, you're next.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass on it. I slipped a mind here, so.
Okay. Then I see Eric took his hand down, so I'm assuming that was an old hand. Mayor Holston, it's your floor.
Thank you, Chair. Jan, I wanted to circle back to what you said, because I think that's really important. And you know, we've all, like, I agree, we've all talked to folks and how do you feel, and heard their opinions about it, and I'm curious, you know, is there a way that you think this can be explained better? I mean, I would ask Brian to tell us the ins and outs of, we can't just arbitrarily send out a bill to everybody that says this is a fee and you have to pay it. I don't think we do that. That's like, that runs into taxation that we're not authorized to do. But I know that we can do it this way with the water bill. But I'm curious, how could we communicate better to the community that explains, while this appears on your water bill, we aren't charging you more for your water. We are actually charging you, and that would resonate with the community better. Do you have any thoughts? I would love to hear them.
Go ahead, Jan.
That's a hard question, because the biggest thing is, I know that a lot of people have said, okay, if I can pay my water bill, but I can't pay that amount in the fee until next month, are they going to shut my water off? That's one of the biggest things that we have. And even though you tell them, you know, either yes, they are, or no, they aren't, they're going right back to that particular thing. And, you know, you have, like Bobby said, you have a lot of people that literally cannot afford a $35 increase in anything, especially now. And I mean, we always say the COVID thing is responsible for a lot of this, but a lot of this is responsible. You know, people just don't have the money. So I guess maybe, I don't know, Kathy, in answer to your question, I think there's got to be another way that we can let people know that we understand that it's hard for them to afford it. And I think we can get them to understand that this might help. But then you also have the people that say, we're not going to get anything extra for this. We're only going to get what we have now. Give me a little something extra. And we might say, sure. So it's just, it's just what I've heard and what we hear from, especially a lot of the older people. And that's, it's hard to not kind of agree with them at times.
Can I ask you another question? Do you think it resonates with people when we say this is to continue with what you have so we don't lose ambulance service and what we currently have? Do you think that understanding of this will subtract, if we don't do this, we will have to subtract from what we have? Do you think that is actually hitting and is being understood?
I think it is. I really do, or at least in the majority of the things that people that we've talked to. I think right now they're so frustrated because the city could cut some things and it's, they're not willing to, in their opinion. Staff is one of the biggest expenses I know we have, and I understand that, and I think everybody does. But to charge them more and not cut, not necessarily, it goes back to the old, and I still say it goes back to the old. We need more money. You can't live without emergency services, so we're gonna charge more for that. That's always been, as long as I can remember, which seems like more years than I can think now. But it always goes back to that. That's a lot of older people especially think it's a scare tactic, which it is to a certain extent. It scares me with my family, that we don't have what we need.
It's not necessarily a scare tactic, but it is scary, isn't it?
But it's a scare tactic in their mind. Let's put it that way. Okay. It's, if you don't pay for this, we're going to outsource it or cut it or whatever is what I'm saying. I don't know what you can do. I think there are other places that we can cut as well. Maybe that would cut down a little bit of what we have to charge people. And the last thing, if Oakridge citizens are the only ones that's paying for it, they kind of feel a little kick in the gut, because then there's, all the outlying areas that we're paying for, in their opinion.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay, I hate to be the bearer of bad news on this wonderful discussion that we're having, but we are at time. So we need to either stop or agree to extend. I personally would opt to stop. I think we have another meeting scheduled for next week. Is that right? May 19th, it looks like. Does that sound reasonable?
Works for me.
Me too.
Me too. I would ask, is Brian, are we done with this section as far as Brian's presentation?
I had a couple more slides, but we pretty much covered them in discussion. So there's no more meat there. We've briefed the entire budget. So at this point, it's a matter of finalizing the budget committee recommendation or approved budget, and going forward with a vote and then a public hearing.
Okay. I did just see a message come up on the chat from, it looks like a citizen. So I just wanted to make a quick announcement that that our public comment is at the beginning of our meetings. But if you would like your question answered, I didn't really read what it was. It would probably behoove you to email that question to either Eric or to Brian, our city administrator, who's in charge of the budget process, and or come to our next meeting at the beginning when we do public comment, and you're welcome to ask questions there. Or reach out to a budget member if you know one. But I think that concludes this meeting, and we will meet again next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Is May 19th a Tuesday? I should clarify.
Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday, okay. And then we have a scheduled meeting on the 25th as well, which is where we do our public hearing. Is that right? Do we have any scheduled after that?
Let me see here. No, the next, and it goes over to council after that meeting.
Providing that we're done by then.
The next meeting, we pretty much have to vote on this schedule that's given.
No, the meeting after that, the 25th is when your public hearing is scheduled. Mayor, I can't hear you.
For the budget committee, Brian?
Yeah, the budget
Yes.
committee has a meeting next week, but no public hearing. It'll just be discussion if you want to do that and try to finalize the budget that the committee is going to recommend. And then May the 25th, which is a Tuesday, you're going to hopefully have your hearing and then approve the budget to send to council.
But why do we have to have the budget approved that day?
It was just a schedule that I was hoping so we don't go into June, the end of June, and be down to the wire trying to get this thing through city council.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify if we were still not at agreement before the 25th, that we could still have another meeting.
Yeah, I'll if it goes long, I'll continue to lay on meetings until we have to shut down the government.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was an option. So it sounds like this meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dawn. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night.